So this painting again is called Stargazing. It is a monochromatic painting, meaning it's basically just shades of blue, all the way from white to black, with blue in the middle. And so it's very sweet and delicate. I like this painting. And so most of this canvas is covered with this light blue. So that's going to take us a little while to put our blue on. And I'm going to pick up, well, let me just go through my supplies first. I have water in a jar. You can have it in your container, whatever you have. I'm only going to use white, black, and blue. I'm going to use a small, medium, and large brush. Mine is a large and a medium flat brush, and the small is a round. And what that means is a flat means that it's round here at the base, but as it goes up, it's crimped so that this crimp is flat. And then you have a broad side and a skinny side. So that's a flat brush. I have two flat brushes, one large, one small, and a round. And I'm going to be washing my brushes a lot. So make sure you have plenty of water. I also have some napkins to dab my clean brushes on. And I am wearing an apron. That's really important too. I'm going to be using a 16 by 20 canvas today. And the reason I'm using a bigger canvas is so that you can see it better. Your canvas is a little bit smaller. I'll try to adjust my measurements accordingly. But then keep in mind that my brushes are a little different than yours and my canvas is a little different size, but we're going to make it work. It always works. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to pick up my big flat brush, my largest flat brush, and I'm going to put it in straight on blue paint. I'm not mixing the blue with anything. Oh, forgive me. Let me back up. Before I do that, let's put some water on the canvas. So you can take any size brush, bigger the better, and put some water on the canvas, and that's going to help our paint move around more smoothly. Denver's a very dry place. And so if you add a little water beforehand, your paint won't dry out quite as quickly. If you were living in Louisiana or Miami or someplace that's really humid, Mississippi, you probably wouldn't need to do this. But in Denver, we do need to keep our paints from drying out too quickly. So it doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to be blending and moving paint around, but yeah, as good as you can. Not too worried about it. I'll give you a minute to do that. So I am going to mix. I took a little bit of blue paint, right? And I'm just going to move that to another part of my plate. Not a lot, just a little. Then I'm going to scoop up some white and I'm going to throw that on. And what I'm going for is a very light blue to start. Very light blue. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work my paint from light blue up to darker blue. So I'm mixing what was on my brush, that blue, with a little white. Now my blue may look a little different than the blue in the painting, and I'll tell you why. We have about 50 different colors of paint here at the studio, and we have 500 original paintings. And so the artists had a lot of different colors to choose from, and they also mix colors. The blue we're using is called phthalo blue. It's a great color to mix with all kinds of paintings, but it may not be the exact same blue that they have. And that's okay, right? It's still going to look beautiful. All right, so I have this light blue, and what I'm going to do is I want to work my way up from light blue to darker blue so that at the corners I'm going to have full-on straight blue. And I'm going to do it kind of like a windshield wiper. So I'm going to start it, let's see, let me divide the canvas. If you spread your hand and you can imagine dividing your canvas in half, right? We want to go below the halfway point, okay? If you're a fractions kind of person, 40% up from the bottom. If you could divide this into 10, go up 4, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this. Oh, that's pretty light. That's pretty dark. So I'm already going to go up a little bit. And I'm going to start in a windshield wiper fashion with this blue. And I'm going to put it on in this kind of, like I said, it's a windshield wiper fashion, but it's giving me brush strokes that create an arch. And I'm going to do it until I run out of paint on my brush. Just going to use all that paint, just use it all up. So that I don't have any more paint on that brush. Then I'm going to take that brush and I'm going to just pick up a little bit of clean water. And I'm going to shake it off. I don't want lots of drips. I just want a couple of extra drops of water on it. And then I'm going to use that to smooth out this bottom area a little bit. And I'm going to go over it with just those 2 drops of water. That's all it is, just those 2 drops of water, and just smooth out what I already did. Just making it a little smoother. And then I'm going to go up with it. It just smoothed out the base a bit. You're probably wondering, why didn't I start at the bottom? This canvas is already white at the bottom. So I could cover it all in blue and then paint it all in white again, or I could just leave the bottom white and then I'll have less to paint over later. Then I'm going to pick up more blue on my brush, front and back. That's just straight on blue, okay? And I'm going to go in my corners and I'm going to the corners are going to be just straight on solid blue. And since you've painted here before, you probably know when we paint around the tops and the sides and the bottom as we go, like this. Yep. Because that creates a gallery wrap. And what that means is that you won't have to put it in a frame for it to look good. You can just put it on the wall because it will be framed already with just the painting. Or you have a choice. You can also buy a frame for it. Either way, change your mind down the road. But if you paint the tops and sides of the bottom, you have an option. And then I'm going to try to keep, well, after I do the top and those corners, I want to just keep with this arch. Just want to keep with the arch. I'm painting in it. I'm just letting my brush run out of paint, but going with the same brush strokes I had before, the same angle, the same arch. The general idea of what we're going for is dark corners coming in to a lighter center. And you can pick up a little bit more blue as you need it to make sure your top and sides to this point are covered with blue. And then whatever's on my brush, I'm going to use that to blend down. I blended up before and now I'm blending down. And you can pick up a little bit of water on your brush, a drop or two, to make things move more smoothly anytime it feels too dry. But only use a drop or two or you'll have drips. We don't want drips.
Sorry.
It's okay. So this is how it's going to work. I am taping the class, but I will edit out all the personal comments and the questions and stuff. So it's just my instruction at the end, and that goes on YouTube. But I sift through every word of it when I edit it. And so don't worry, you can say anything you want and it will be edited out. And only my instructions will remain to go on YouTube.
Okay.
But if you do have a loud noise, lots of dog barking or the phone ringing or, you know, an alarm going off or something, then if you would just go ahead and mute, and then you can unmute when you need to ask a question. So up to you. Oh, that's a judgment call. We're going to keep going. And what we're going to do is we're just going to make sure that it's white down here and it's mixed with white down here, blue and white. And then as we go up, it gets bluer and bluer. Okay. I want the corners up here nice and solid blue, right? In the arch shape, right? Both of them nice and solid blue in the arch shape. And then the corners a little bit more blue than the middle. And the reason for that, but always going with that arch shape, the reason why the sides, the reason why the sides get a little more darker blue is because that brings your eye into the lighter part of the painting. It's a little vision trick, a little optical trick to make the sides a little bit darker. And I'm going to blend all that in. So the top's blue, that's where the stars are going to go. The very top is blue. But from here to here, I'm going to have to start blending in a little bit of white. So remember that blue we made at first? I could just add more blue to it. You just add a little more blue to it. Just mixing in more blue to what I started with. I'm not using all my blue paint. I'm trying not to make a ton of it, but then I can kind of put that in the middle area and then just blend up. Maybe I need to add more blue. You're going to have to just tweak it and eyeball it. But the general idea is the higher the paint goes up, the bluer it gets. The sky gets darker with blue. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And adding water when you need it. Denver is so dry right now because of the cold. The heater's been on since the cold came back. And so you do probably need to add a drop or two of water. And it's okay if there's some streaks in your blue, as long as they go with that arch shape. The streaks are kind of cool, actually. And the background takes a little while, so no rush, okay? If you get down here and you look and you stand back and you say, you know, that's too dark. Mine's a little dark. I can always come in and pick up a little bit more white on my brush and start down here with white and then blend up. And that'll just add a little light gradually. If you see any canvas marks, like these right here, there's some canvas marks. It's just where the paint is a little thin. Just, you know, mix a little more color of that paint of that color and just add more paint. You can also try a drop or two of water. If you think it already has a lot of paint in that area, just add a drop or two of water and it will just help kind of thin that down a bit and spread it. If you keep going, if your paint is too wet and you keep going over the same area, you might be picking up paint rather than laying it down. So if it's very wet and you keep going over it and it's not getting better, let that dry. And you can come back and give it another layer after it's dry. You'll know, if you're doing that, you'll know. People tell me, I keep going over it, but it's not better. Sometimes we're picking up paint rather than laying it down. And we want the paint to look smooth in this painting because this is a very peaceful painting. So it's worth taking our time on the background and making it a nice, smooth texture to the best of our ability. But always keeping with the back and forth windshield wiper motion. And don't forget the sides, okay? It's amazing what just a drop of water on your brush will do to smooth it out. I like to stand back and look at my painting from about 5 feet away. It just gives me a better perspective. It's hard to see something up close that you've been staring at. So if you get a chance to move a few feet away and look at it from across the room before we move on to the next step, I think you're going to be able to see anything you might want to tweak or change much better from that point of view, from that perspective. And I don't know if you're drinking tonight. I'm going to have some water. I might change my mind and start with some wine. Switch to some wine. I'm going to start with some water. So here's to a Friday night sipping and painting. Cheers.
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 We're going to go ahead and put stars in the sky. Woohoo! I'm going to take the bottom of my tiny little brush. I'm going to dip it in white. And then I'm just going to go around in these dark areas mostly. And I'm just going to tap on stars randomly until I run out of paint on the brush. Then I'll dip it again. But look at how many times I can dip. I can pop on stars without even dipping. It's a lot. But I want to accentuate the darker parts and keep them random. And you could do the sides as well, since our paintings, if you did paint around the tops and the sides and the bottom to make a gallery wrap, then don't forget the sides too for stars. And make sure you're not putting them in any order. We don't want it to look like a dots game. Maybe put 2 or 3 together here and there and some just alone. That's how they would be in the sky, little constellations, I guess. You could put the Big Dipper if you want, whatever you like. And I'm kind of putting those in an arch shape too. It's almost like the world revolves around this peaceful scene. This moment in time. And then I just wiped off the bottom of my brush on napkin. I'm still going to use this brush in a second when we make our moon. Sitting on a creaky chair. All right, let me know when you're ready for the moon.
Ready.
Awesome. So I'm going to take that little detail brush and I'm going to put it in white paint, put quite a bit on. And then we're going to make a moon without a template. And we want it to be not perfectly in the center. We want it to be off center to the right a little bit. So if your painting is
this
1, 2, like and a half hands,
Is this like
maybe yours
tiny-
is just, sorry, go ahead.
Is this like the tiny pinpoint brush or that flat edge one?
A round brush. So
Okay.
one that's not crimped, it goes all the way around, because that's going to help us make a circle better.
Okay.
So just go from the center and go off center, okay? And then this is going to be about 1/3 of the way down your canvas, okay? So if you can imagine dividing it into 3 parts, it's going to be off center and about 1/3 of the way down, okay? And to make that circle, I'm going to take that white paint on my brush and I'm going to put my brush on a, make a dot first. And then I'm going to slowly just circle out. But notice what I'm doing. I'm holding my pinky and touching the dry canvas. If yours isn't dry, I wouldn't do that. But if it is dry or even mostly dry, you can touch it and then fix it later. But it helps me steady my hand. So that's kind of a nice thing to do if you've got a dry spot. If not, just take your time and go slow. And I'm going to slowly circle out until I have the size of about a 50-cent piece or maybe a silver dollar. 50-cent piece. I don't even know what size that is. A little bigger than a quarter on mine. But your canvas is a little smaller, so you could do a quarter. But just go slow. Just go slow so that you can keep that circular shape. I don't know anyone, even the teachers we had here with art degree, 4-year art degrees, I don't know anyone who can draw a perfect circle from scratch. Now mine's obviously a little higher than this one. Yours may be somewhere in between, or it might be higher, might be lower. It doesn't really matter. Do whatever feels good to you. You can make your moon larger or smaller. You decide. It's your world. It's your moment in time in this painting. You decide. I made mine a little larger just because that way I can build it down, make it a little lower. But you decide. My painting's not going to be exactly like Cynthia's, and yours isn't going to be exactly like either one of them. And that's good. That's a good thing because we get to see your personality come out in your painting. That's what we want. And I like to remember, moons aren't perfectly round. They have craters. And sometimes the day before a full moon or the day after a full moon, they look like a full moon, but they're not perfectly a full moon. So if it's not perfect, it's okay. After you get your circle, then I'm going to take a tiny bit of black, just a tiny bit, and a tiny bit of white. I don't need much at all, just a teeny tiny little bit. About as much black as a ladybug would track in on the carpet if you walked through tar, right? Just a tiny, tiny bit of black mixed with a little more white. And I'm just going for a light gray on my detail brush. And then I'm going to pop on some craters. And I'm going to put more of them on one side of the moon than the other, because moons usually have a dark side and a light side. And I'm putting them kind of in a crescent shape. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to put black on mine so that you can really see what I'm doing, okay? If you don't want to put it on with your brush, you could put it on with your finger. It's just, this is a small moon this time, so it's a little bit harder, but if you want to put it on with your pinky, go for it, it's fun. So I'm putting it, You want to do it in gray, not black, but I wanted to do it black so that you could see it. We want a dark side of the moon and a light side of the moon. And you can put a few random ones in the light side of the moon, just so it's not perfect. I'm going to go over that and put a little more white because I did use black just so I could show you. But if it's too black or you just want to mess it up even more, put a little white over it and tap it on. We want it to just have a bumpy looking mottled texture to show those moon crevices, and I guess there's hills and valleys on moons. Something like that. I know you're a lot younger than me, but there was an album when I was a kid called The Dark Side of the Moon that was very popular.
Yeah, I've heard of that before.
Yeah.
Who is that by?
Pink Floyd.
Mm.
I think it's Pink Floyd. Classic rock. Old hippies never die, they just teach art. All right, so you can always come back and tweak it later. If you, at the end of the night, when you look at your painting, if you go, oh, there's a little bit more I could do with my moon, you can always fix it. So don't worry about anything too much right now. I, for some reason, love to put paint on my fingers when I'm doing a moon. It's just so much more fun. All right, so I'm gonna pick up my detail brush, and then I'm gonna put white paint on it, and we're just gonna put in a suggestion line kind of right here under our hill. I'm gonna paint over a little bit of this down there, but I wanna start making this line right here, okay? So I'm gonna go up a little bit because I went lower, right? This here is a lot lower than here. You see that? And I still want it to be more of a hill. Does that make sense? And your hill doesn't have to exactly match mine. It's not a big deal. So if this is, so there's 1/3 of my painting, 2/3 of my painting, oh, wait, 1/3, 2/3, and this is 3/3. My bottom of this black is going to be about 1/3 of the way up. I'm going to put a dot right there. And if it's a little more, a little less, doesn't matter, who cares? And then I'm just going to draw on a squiggly line that's going to be the line that goes under my black, okay? So it starts about here, and then it goes up. So it goes up, and then it goes down. Goes up, and then down. and then up again, and then down. And then I want to make it, hopefully I came down enough in my blue that I can just go like this and finish it up and with a squiggly line, hopefully. But if you didn't come that far down in your blue, you can just make the hill a little higher. Does that make sense? I hope it does. No one's ever going to see the original. They're not going to say, oh, that hill was higher. I know that hill was higher, right? They're not going to see it. They're just going to see your painting and they're going to think you're an absolute genius. And then I'll just fill in down here for my hill. And then step back and look at it and see if you can live with it. See if you like it. If you don't, you know what to do. You can mix that blue again and fill it back in. Or we could put more black lower. We could also do that. So there's lots of ways we can fix it if you don't like it, if you took off too much blue. Don't worry, be happy. That's what I love about painting. You make a mistake, no one's going to die. My hill went too high. I can just drop down my black. No big deal. But I'm going to let that dry a little. All right, so remember that light blue we used for the sky? I mixed it with more white, so I have a really pale blue, very pale. And I'm going to use that really pale blue. Oops, that's not pale blue enough. So make it really pale, okay? I'm going to scribble in some very pale blue to create shadows. And remember when we were talking about having these corners bluer? It's an optical illusion in a painting, which is a great thing to do, to have your corners darker than your focal point, your focal area. And so even though we think the focal point is the deer, it's really the sunshine here on the snow. This general area is the focal point, including the deer, I guess. But anyway, so I'm going to darken my corners with just this palest pale blue, just to add some shadow to the right-hand corner. I'm going to do the same thing up here. Just make sure that this part of the snow has some scribbled on and not neat. Don't fill it all in perfectly. It's supposed to be scribbly, just scribbly, because real snow, these shadows would be very scribbly. I'm going to add more white. I want this to be pale, pale, pale. And just, you can even add more white indiscriminately so that there's shades, various shades of white and blue in that too. That's kind of fun. All right. So, and I want to make sure it's scribbly and it doesn't end abruptly. I'm going to put more down here. This shape kind of looks like a bottlenose dolphin coming out of the snow. Don't actually paint a bottlenose dolphin, but that's the general shape of it. Just kind of like coming up like that. I used to tell people in my Bob Ross classes that we do here during non-pandemic times that the clouds are shaped kind of like a snail. And then I had all these people painting snails in the sky. So now I have to tell them, okay, I don't mean that literally, just kind of, sort of. So it comes up at an angle and it's a little wavy. And it's just creating slopes, or if you're a skier, maybe some moguls. The blue represents the more depressed areas of the snow. There's a teeny tiny bit right in here as well, but so faintly, mostly white. Just a little bit. Our canvas was already white, And we're just adding small amounts of just the softest, most pale light blue, but in streaks. And I'm not covering all my white. I just want this streaky effect. Very light, very, very light. I'll hold up this one. Maybe you can see this one better. There is a dot in this one. There's a hole in the canvas I have to repair. But if you can ignore that dark dot. And then you can take a drop of water after it sets a moment and it starts to dry a bit. If it's too streaky for you and you want it to be a little softer, you can take just a drop of water, just a drop, and then just kind of tap it and rub it in and just make it smoother if you need it more smooth. But with a clean, dry brush and a drop of water, it just helps smooth out any harsh lines. I want it to be smooth, but I also want it to have just a little amount of color at an angle pointing down because it is a hill and not completely covered with paint. Let some of that canvas just be naked there. Be no paint. And if you put on your blue too dark, pick up a little tiny splash of white with a drop of water on a big brush and a big clean brush, and then just go over it. Make it a little smoother, a little whiter. It's your hill and your world, and your deer is going to live there. And someday you can take them for a walk with your dog and your cute little puppy can meet them. But you want to resist the urge to overblend. Don't make it all light blue. Keep some streaks. Okay, so I'm going to make sure there's no white on my medium brush. And then I'm going to pop my medium brush in some black paint on both sides, but not so much. I'm not a scoop. I just want it on my bristles enough thickly, but not a scoop. Okay. So I want to have a little bit of control over it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint a black line a little higher than my white. And so I'm going to start, on my painting, it's going to be about 1 inch. On yours, maybe it's 1/2 inch, but maybe something like that above the white. And I'm just going to make lots of bumps. And then I'm going to come up in a hill, but I'm going to keep moving my brush and making it wiggly. Don't make it straight. And then I'm going to make a couple other bumps, but very wiggly, little faraway peaks, and just don't make anything too uniform. And so we're just making a black line above that white line. And then pull it all the way to the end. Does it have to be perfect? No, it's better if it's not. it more or less mimics the white line, but it's a little bumpier and a little higher. So that there's a space between the white line and the black line that's, depending on where, between 1 finger and 2 fingers wider. I hope that makes sense. Maybe 1 finger wider, just a little bit. And by fingers, I mean tips, just a little bit. Just keep it bumpy. Nothing in nature is straight. And this definitely shouldn't be straight. We want it to look really natural. And make sure that the bumps, each one's a little different than the bump next to it. Maybe some are square, maybe some are taller, maybe some are pointier. Each one represents a little hill or peak or who knows what. Let me know when you've got that on.
We're good.
Okay. I want you to take a look at this painting. Do you see the top line is smooth? Do you see that? Top black line is smooth. See how rough this bottom is? This looks like torn paper down here. Can you see that?
Yep.
But then this is smooth. So we can always make the top smoother with a fine detail brush if we want. But the bottom, we want that rough torn paper look because that suggests some scrub, some little plants that the snow doesn't stick to perfectly. So that rough edge is deliberate. And I'm going to create that rough edge by just scribbling. I'm going to come under here with the line, make line, but then I want to just kind of end it by just pulling down. And I don't want to pull down in a straight line. I want some to be sharper or some to be longer than others, but I want this kind of torn look at the base. And I'm overlapping it with that white. At the bottom, I'm not drawing a line, I'm more like tapping the bottom. Does that make sense? I just want the bottom to be messier, more jagged, less perfect. And I'm just filling in between the white and the black line, just overlapping a little with the white, just enough that I get some interesting shapes. Keep looking up here if you want to see what I mean. And that this slightly jaggedy line at the bottom. Like I said, that just suggests having it tapped on at the bottom rather than a straight line. Like here, I can do a straight line. Right under that black line, I can do straight. I can fill it in straight, nice and smooth. But when I get down here, if I just tap it on, then those little bristles just create what looks like the suggestion of far away trees or bushes or scrub. It just gives it a rough texture that makes my imagination wonder, what is making those teeny little lines way far back on the horizon? And keep that line bumpy too. Don't make that straight either, because just like any other thing in nature, the hills aren't straight. Now remember, don't make this perfectly straight, okay? You want it jagged. The more jagged it looks, the more natural it looks. And if you put on too much black later on, you can always let that dry completely and come back on and, you know, tap on a little more white at the base. I mean, if this is a little bigger than this is of mine, so I could let it totally dry. At the end of the painting, at the end of the evening, I can come back in and tap on a little white if I want to make it thinner. You can always correct things by letting your mistakes dry completely, covering them with white, letting that dry completely. And that way it becomes like correction fluid. And then you can paint over it again. And sometimes we paint over paintings entirely again. But don't ever paint white over black when it's still wet, or you'll just get gray. All right, so I'm gonna make sure my brushes are really clean. Now I'm gonna use, okay, so find your smallest flat brush. That's the one that's crimped. Do you have more than one flat brush in your kit?
Yes, we have 2.
Awesome, okay. Now I'm gonna, these pine trees are a little bit tricky because they're small. If you find them difficult, you can always paint them a little bigger in your composition, totally up to you. I'm gonna show you with this paper so that you can see it larger. I'm gonna make it larger. And if you have practice paper, you can practice bigger too. But I want you to see it bigger, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I put black on my smallest flat brush, and then I'm gonna chisel it on the side so I get any clumps off. It's got plenty of paint on it, but I don't want any lumps. I want that to be a nice chiseled edge. And then I'm gonna tap down, I'm gonna tap down from the top of my pine tree, a trunk, and I didn't just pull it down, I tapped on. Then I'm gonna drop down from the top, depending on the size of the tree, it might be a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch, whatever, you know, you have to think about the size of the tree, but make it pointy at the top. Always have a point at the top of a pine tree where no branches are growing, because that's where the trunk is just shooting up. And then I'm going to drop down and I'm going to tap with that flat part of my brush, holding it pretty flat, holding this part, so I'm just getting the flat edge. And I'm dropping down, and it's almost like I'm making little mustaches as I come out. But as I drop down farther down the tree, I'm going to press a little harder, and I'm going to come out a little farther because I want that triangular shape to the tree. And is it going to be perfect? No, we don't want it perfect. But press harder as you go down. You're probably going to be running out of paint anyway. And we're going to go all the way down to the bottom. The reason we're going all the way down to the bottom with those branches is that when you see a pine tree in City Park or on a lawn, it's because someone removed the bottom branches to mow underneath. But out in the woods, the grass grows right up to the bottom of the lowest branch. And then if your trunk is skimpy, well, let me just say, these branches grow out to this direction, right? These branches grow this direction, but then we need to paint the ones that come forward and the ones that go back. And the way we do that is we pick up a little more black on our brush, and then we just tap over just the trunk area, only the trunk area, that middle area, because that adds fullness and it paints the branches sticking straight out toward you and straight back. I'm leaving the tips of the branches alone. I'm not adding fullness on the tip on either side, just only over the center. And that kind of hides the trunk a bit. It's kind of like if you were helping, I don't know if you've ever helped anyone put together a Christmas tree, or maybe you have yourself an artificial one. The trunk, if you don't fluff it out, the trunk looks skimpy. So you want to avoid having the trunk show, but you do want each individual branch at the ends to show. So there's a fine line. We want to make sure that we can see sky and snow between the branches, and that there's space for the birds to fly in and build a nest. But we don't want it to make it so solid that it just looks like an ice cream cone. Too solid, okay? All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that on with this tree right here. And it's gonna be a little bit tricky with this size brush. So if yours is if it's a little tricky, that's okay. Just make a slightly bigger tree. So I'm going to start up here in the sky. I'm going to tap down. I'm going to go below this black line. And then I'm going to drop down. Remember, always leave a point. And then I'm going to tap on those upper branches. The upper ones are really small. I'm holding my brush straight. I'm not doing it this way. I'm not doing it that way. I'm just holding it straight across. I'm tapping on individual branches. I'm not going for perfect. When I get to the black part, it doesn't matter. You can't see it anyway, but just for my brain's sake, I'm going to tap those on. And then I'm going to keep going down. And again, remember that triangular shape. Remember to leave space between the branches so the birds can fly in, build a nest. Go all the way down to the end of your trunk. And then use that brush one more time, tap over the center middle area for the branches that are pointing toward you and going straight back. And that also hides the trunk. If that scares you, you can always practice on paper. But I did the first tree first, or the biggest tree first, because that's the one you learn on. But then there's 3 tiny baby ones here, 2 there. If they get so small, we could just use the tiny detail brush and do the same thing. I'm going to show you this one more time with the next biggest tree. So I'm going to make it a little higher there. I'm going to come down not as far. It sits back farther. Drop down from the point. I'm tapping down. I always tell people if they've ever rappelled before, it's the same kind of motion if you've ever rappelled before off a mountainside. You drop down as you go out. And I almost never hear anyone say, oh yeah. Usually they have no idea what I'm talking about, but that's a general idea when people rappel too. And then fill in the space over the center. It's going to be hard to see the middle of the trees because they overlap with this black area. When I get to these teeny tiny trees, I could use my medium flat that I've been using, or small flat, whatever you want to call it, or I can switch to a fine detail brush, whatever you feel more comfortable with. I think I'm going to do one more with this size. But notice how I'm having the trees, some are higher and some are lower. And I want to make sure each one is a different size. And bringing all the branches all the way down. So when you, if you want to do these tiny little trees, again, they don't have to be in exactly the same spot as the original, but you can just use a round brush, a round detail brush, and it's the same exact thing, just you're just using a round brush. And they don't have to be quite as perfect because they're so far away. No one's going to put their nose in your painting this close. Hopefully. If they do, you need new friends, right? So I can put little tiny trees. And I'm putting my trees at different levels because I want it to look like the trees are just kind of randomly growing in this forest. They're not lined up like they would be at Disney World. So the ones that are a little forward, maybe those are little babies. The ones that are tiny and they're farther back, those are just far away. But the tiny detail brush also works. Just a little more tapping involved. Remember, you can always make them taller. Just add more trunk to the top, make it pointier. Always want to have a nice point at the top of any pine tree. Nice clear point. That tells your eye, I'm a pine tree. My cluster is not as good as her cluster, but you know what? That's all right. I can have cluster envy. So at the base of each tree, well, I mixed a little white with a little black to make a light gray. Okay. And at the base of each tree, I'm just going to pull down the same slope of the hill, a little scribble shadow. It's small under a small tree, and under a bigger tree, it's going to be a bigger shadow. So corresponding to the size, and I'm pulling it down the slope. Excuse me. So it starts out wider at the base, and then it mimics kind of that triangular shape, but it goes down the slope. So this big tree is going to have a much bigger shadow, and it's scribbled on, scribble, 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 and it's going to go down the slope in a triangular kind of fashion. And I'll do the same thing on each tree, just kind of keeping in mind how big it is. Each tree needs a little shadow, just gray, or it's like a silvery gray. Pull down the same direction of the slope. So if this one is a little, the slope is a little not quite as steep, I can always change it. I can put white over it, like correction fluid, and change it. Just try to mimic the slope as best you can. No one's going to be staring that close, but you can always fix anything, just little white paint. All right. You can use the same brushes that you painted the trees on, or just a little one, whatever's easier for you. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap on. I'm only going to go over the trees that are dry. Okay. So wait, if you see any shiny areas, wait. I'm just going to tap on snow onto the branches, but I'm going to not cover up all the black. I want to put on about a third as much white as I did black. And I'm just repeating the steps, starting in the trunk and tapping out. But I want to put far less paint on this overall. Far less. Because I don't want to hide all the black. Bob Ross used to say you have to have dark to see the light, which is a really good painting tip as well as metaphor for life. Don't cover all your black. Don't cover all your black. And bring that snow all the way out to the tips of the branches, because of course snow would be sitting on the very tips a lot. It wouldn't be so much in the center of the tree, That should be darker, but on the tips, it should be pretty bright. Extend it out to the very tips of the branches. And I'll do each tree that way. The biggest mistake people make with that is they cover their trees with too much white. I make that mistake all the time. And then I kick myself. So just try not to cover too much. And it's not on perfectly. Some branches might not have any at all. Maybe the birds were fighting in the tree or flying around and knocked some off. Maybe somebody climbed the tree. Maybe a bear climbed the tree. We don't know. So not every branch is full of snow. You can skip around. I didn't bother painting the trunk, just tapping down the trunk like I did when I made the tree, because the trunk is protected. It's not really getting any snow. Make sure to leave spaces for the birds to fly in and make their nests. Or go feed their babies, whatever they have to do in there. If your tree's still wet, just wait. Give you all the time you need. If your trees are still wet, don't put it on in gray. I'm in no hurry. Just if your trees are still, the black is still wet, just wave around your painting until it's dry. And you'll know when if it's still shiny, it's wet. Or you could rub it on your partner, and if they scream, then it was wet. So, but I don't recommend it that way. Especially if they're in your bubble and you have to live with them to the end of the pandemic. Definitely don't make your partner mad. Kind of like tapping on garlands if you're painting a Christmas tree. Great. So I'm going to use a clean sheet of paper. I want to show you this deer a little larger so you can see him. Do you guys, I know you have a puppy. Do you have a Kong for your puppy?
Yes, we have a few actually.
Okay. So I don't know if you have a traditional Kong, but a traditional Kong is wide at the base and then it gets pointier, it's kind of like egg shaped. Is yours like that?
Yes.
All right. So that's basically the deer's body.
Okay.
If you look at this deer, you'll see that this is an egg shape. It's
Yep.
kind of a strange thing, but basically he's got his tushy pointed out at us. We're looking at his rump. So because of the way he's standing, that body makes an egg shape. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Or similar to a Kong. I have Kongs on my mind. All right. So what I'm going to do, just kind of watch what I do first, okay? And then if you want to practice it on paper, you can. But here's what I would recommend. When you paint yours on, don't paint it in black. Paint it in light blue. The reason for that is that once you paint it on and you like it, you can paint it on in black. Does that make sense? If we paint it on in black, then we'd have to keep letting it dry, covering it with white, do it again. But if we just paint it on in very light blue, then we can still see it, but it's not permanent. We can still change it. And then we can just paint snow over it easily. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to paint an egg shape. So if you want to paint it on paper just to practice, that might be a good idea. So the first thing is it's an egg shape. And again, I would paint yours in light blue. I'm going to paint mine in light blue to start, I think. But I'm painting it right now in black so that you can see it. And it's not going to be perfect. That's okay. There's my egg shape. There's his little bottom. It's actually a little wider than an egg, I guess. His little rump is pretty wide. I can make an egg better that way. You can always turn your canvas. But again, I'm practicing on paper because it's going to help me too. And my egg shape. I have chickens. You'd think I'd know how to make an egg, right? All right. So got the egg shape. You could even make it a little rounder if you want. Don't make a skinny egg. And then from the egg shape, there's from the end at the top, there's a neck, as there should be, because he's a deer. But it's wider at the base and thinner at the top. My brush, it's kind of hard on this paper actually. But then there's another egg shape going backwards for his head. I probably should have a smaller brush. And then his ears are like a crescent, starting at his head and then flicking up on one side. Same thing on the others, like a crescent, pointier at the tips, attached to the top, and they're perked up. My brush is not a very fine brush. I'm going to tweak this with a finer brush, but I have to go get one. But I'll just show you the legs. He only has 3 legs showing. The first one looks short because it's in the front, and we're seeing his tail area, right? More. That should be pretty round. We're seeing his tail area more, so his front leg is going to look short. It's going to come, follow the curve around in the front and then just come down, but not too far. His back legs are going to be longer. They're going to come out from the bottom of his rump, and the outer one's going to bow in. The inner one is going to bow in the other direction. That's a little long. My brush is pretty terrible, actually. It's way too thick, and I need to go get a better brush. I'm going to blame this on the brush. But anyway, then you can tweak from there. That's the general idea, but you can always, if you paint with your light blue, you can always tweak from there, okay? I made them hit their legs too far apart and too small. So now I'm gonna just tweak. Now he's starting to look a little more deer-like. Hopefully that's a little better. But again, draw it on with your smallest brush and light blue paint. And then if you mess up, just cover it over with white and make it snow again. And then once you get it on with light blue paint, then let it dry and then cover it with black. So when you get your deer looking the way you want him to, notice that this little ear, kind of like the shape of a boomerang on his ears. So when you get your deer the way you want it, and I have mine in blue, I'm going to go ahead and cover over the black with blue. Pardon me, let me say that again. Cover over the blue with black, and then I'm going to sign my name in the bottom right-hand corner. So I've got my deer here. Now mine's not exactly the same, but it's close enough. I'm feeling pretty good about it. So I'm going to go ahead and cover him with black because I painted him on with blue. So I'm just covering over that blue with black. So he is a silhouette, just like the mountains, just like the trees. His tail is probably not visible because it is facing us, or her tail rather. I don't know what kind of deer this is, no idea, so I can't tell you exactly the shape of the ears, but I'm sure there are plenty of different species of deer, and we don't know exactly what this one is. That's okay. That's all right. All right, so when you're finished, just go ahead and sign your name in the bottom right-hand corner. I might have to fix the arms on mine. That's okay. You know, sometimes it just takes some tweaking, but I'll go ahead and finish it off with a signature. And if I want to come back and tweak the legs a little bit, I can, no worries. Oops. Thank you so much for painting with me at Sipping and Painting in Hampden. I hope you enjoyed painting this lovely little painting called Stargazing. Isn't that sweet? Very sweet little painting by local Denver artist Cynthia Ehrenstein. Thank you so much. Have a great night.